Awesome. Julie, I'm super excited to have you.
I'm so thrilled to be here. It's just so serendipitous and fun.
I'm petting your book.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
kissing it because it's so magical. Okay, ready for this magic? So years ago, maybe even in my it was in my old house, which I've been in this house for 5 years. So plus 5 years. I get this incredible email from this woman, and she said, I've been reading your blogs and I'm obsessed with you. I've been stalking you a little bit online and I want to work with you. And so I said, cool, come over. Like, I'm super casual and like a whatever kind of person. I said, okay, awesome. So she came over and we met, and she's like, I want a job. So I'm like, great, I'll hire you. You'll work at my yoga studio. That sounds wonderful. And then she was kind of hemming and hawing because she got an offer at a law office, like a sort of typical DC job. And I was very creative and fluid and like didn't have an office, just kind of like how I am. And so she calls me and she's like, I'm sorry, I can't take the job. And I was psyched because that at the time she was still Liz Lemons. Liz Lemon was
the best name ever.
The best name. And so organized. And so I could just tell, and meticulous. I mean, the letter, her handwriting, everything. I was like, I need a Liz in my life. I'm 2 seconds. I need a Liz. So I was disappointed because I was really excited, but also life is life. And I had small babies and was like, okay, whatever. It'll flow back. If it flows back, you got to go do your thing, girl. I get it. So fast forward a few more years, I'm in a new house. I think I have a different kid at that point, and our studio evolved to probably another location. And she writes me a note and says, can I come back? Like, I did it. I did the DC thing. It didn't work. Can I come work with you? And so she came, and she was the manager of my yoga studio for a while. And we became so super close. And she and I would have these long talks about Enneagram because she's obsessed with the Enneagram. But the reason I'm telling you all of this is because the whole time this beautiful light was in my life, she kept telling me, there's someone you have to meet. There's someone I want you to meet because you remind me so much of her, because I had been a classroom teacher, and principal, and I'm obsessed with kids and learning. And so having this family yoga studio with kids and babies all around, she really felt that energy. And I feel, as I've been studying you behind the scenes, that we're sort of kindred spirits with all the things we like to do and have our hands in.
I love it.
So she said, you got to meet Julie. You got to meet my best friend's mom. You would just love her. She homeschooled, So I was like, yeah, cool. Awesome. Sounds like I'd love to, but it sort of like got filed away. Fast forward, obviously I closed the studio. Liz is long gone. Now she's got her own baby and I love her. And she lives back close to you again, doesn't she?
Oh, yeah. No, 25 minutes away.
Okay,
crazy.
Good. Well, I'm going to come for a visit. So fast forward, I start to tiptoe into the homeschooling world. And I start to really pay attention that all of these books I'm reading about wellness and humans and well-being and development, it really starts to become a crossroads where I realize my kids are in our local public school, that I'm really starting to get out of alignment with the schools and learning. And that was about 6 months ago. And for the past 6 months, people have been sending me your name and all your stuff. And I never put it together.
My gosh.
It occurred to me because I just kind of was like, okay, that's great. And then this summer, actually, it must have been, I started putting it together because randomly this summer, I was in a wild women's business club group with your daughter. And
my gosh.
Said, are you Pleasance from Washington who owns Little Om Yoga? I said, yeah. She said, my best friend was your manager.
Oh my gosh.
I said, I know all about you and your mom and your homeschooling. Like, I knew so much about your family. So then, this fall, as people are telling me, you gotta meet this Julie, you have to contact her, you gotta read all her books. Finally, I put it all together. I said, okay, this is my girl. I gotta know her because I'm listening. So I'm so thrilled that you have this new book, The Brave Learner, that you would be willing to have a conversation with a random stranger who feels like she's been stalking you for years without even knowing.
Oh my gosh, loved everything you just shared. I love that kind of serendipity. I think I come through a really similar funnel only years before. I was a La Leche League leader. My babies were born at home. My mom in the 1970s became a complete nutrition nut. So we eliminated all of the red dye number 2 and EDTA and all of the sort of, fructose. I mean, we were like nutrition conscious before that was a thing nationwide. And so wellness and holistic living and sort of the integration of understanding your child as a human being, not as an adult in training, that's really been my life. And even my public education was during the 1970s in Malibu Canyon with ex-Peace Corps volunteers, like progressives. So much of what I experienced in my childhood and then my early adulthood really contributed to that decision to homeschool. It was such a logical extension of all the things you just described. I completely get where you're coming from.
And I'm also, just to be very transparent, is I'm not sure. Apparently DC has this amazing community. This is what I've been learning. And
Truly.
That's awesome. And the museums are free. Anyway, it may or may not happen for us.
Right.
We may or may not make that decision. Regardless of any of that, we have a micro school that just opened here, Julie, that's like a one-room schoolhouse. And if the kids take their shoes out, it's just like my heart, like I walked in.
I love it.
Oh, I love this space. I love the way we learn. And last night I was looking through your book again and I was like, oh man, I'm going to bring this to the head of school because of the micro school. I think one of my kids will probably end up there next year.
Yes.
We'll see. But regardless, this philosophy, being able to implement the strategies, the creativity, the ideas, it's even been, what's so interesting is touching into what you share. You have so many resources on YouTube, you have podcasts, you are a wealth of information. And I highly suggest that anyone who has children,
yes,
no matter if you're homeschooling, Julie
that's
is
right.
bomb about writing, about all the things. And even from this 6-month study, my relationship with my kids after school has been changing because I realized, holy moly, there's this whole opportunity that I wasn't tapping into as in playfulness. And so like even a few weeks ago, we started just playing solitaire, something sort of like super old fashioned, and there may be lots of moms out there who are like, oh yeah, we've been doing that for years. That came natural. For me, running a business, like managing my kids' school and after school and all of that and my own and everyone's social emotional, some of the basics I've let go of, not on purpose.
Yes.
Because of technology and all the things. So just kind of a return to creativity and excitement. I love you said, clear the table.
Coffee table, yeah.
Yeah, and put one object, right? And then like see what happens.
Yes.
So tell everybody who's listening, we got a little bit of your background. Wait, personal question. Did you ever rebel against the food thing? Did you ever have a time when you were like, I want to eat all the sugar?
You know what? This is really a great question, actually, because I think it goes to the heart of my philosophy. My mom was a really amazing role model. So there was never like a requirement. She was like a learner simultaneous to us. So what I remember, I had really bad asthma as a small child, and so did my brother. So that's what turned her toward this nutrition craze. So she was always experimenting. She's like, well, what would happen if we took sugar out and saw how that was a week later. And then she'd be like, oh, but we can't live without sugar. How about we get like plain yogurt and make a sundae with honey and walnuts? And so we got to put as much honey on as we wanted, and it was in a cute bowl, and we had a nice spoon. And then we all took a bite, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is the most sour thing I've ever eaten. There was like this freedom to have a true reaction. She wasn't coming from a state of paranoia or trying to convert us. She was coming from this like shared journey of learning and experimentation. I don't even think she realizes that that's
lucky.
the kind of mother she was, but she absolutely was. So literally in high school, I went 4 years without eating sugar. I would go on these ice cream runs with my friends and I'd get a banana. This was all self-chosen. And my younger siblings, they as adults are pretty healthy eaters, especially my sister. My brother might have been the one who was more like, yay, I'm 18, I'm going to go to McDonald's for a period. But there was not it wasn't a rebellion against my mother ever, because there was nothing to rebel against. She didn't set it up as a high stakes experiment. It was literally leading us along. I still remember being in the supermarket and she'd be like, all right, everybody, grab a can and read the ingredients and tell me which one is free of additives. Like that.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Learning, the love of learning and experimenting and curiosity. And I just heard something last week. I wish I could remember where I heard it from, but I don't. I just remember the line of health has become our new religion.
Definitely.
And
definitely. And in fact, let me just take that a step further, because I actually do have a pretty big foot in that world. Having grown up in it, watched it evolve, having been a home birther and a La Leche League leader, breastfeeding person, I care about food. But I also grew up in a sort of affluent community. When I got married, we were not affluent at all. And there is a certain privilege that is tied to pursuing health. It requires a certain income base, certain access. And I had to figure out how to make what I thought were good choices at a different economic level, with different limits too. A husband who didn't grow up that way, kids who maybe were different. So one of the things I watched is sometimes in the health movement, there became sort of this hierarchy. A mother that's in your community who makes it very clear that when her kids are around, you shouldn't have anything sugar because it would be tempting. It becomes like a religious experience, almost treating certain foods as sinful. And I never wanted that for my children. I wanted them to feel like they could have Skyline chili with their friends and not feel guilty about it. And that they could survive it, that there's resilience, that our bodies are not so sensitive. And I actually watched people go into what they call nutritional anorexia, where they're trying to detox, but they're detoxing so hard, they're actually malnourishing themselves and they end up in the hospital. I've seen that happen a couple times. So I tried to find, the middle way, whatever that is, still trying, right?
Yeah. And it's shifting, but I just want to point that out because I think I just want to continue to talk about it. I know that there's a lot of women that I hear in our community and in our circles who just say, I just want to cook, healthy meals and healthy food for everybody. And health has just become this obsession.
Yes.
And it is extremely, especially in DC, it is extremely privileged conversation. And it's becoming something that is like hooking on the mind of the women. And so underneath it, especially because I come from a yoga and Ayurveda and spiritual background. So for me, I always say, hold on a minute, what's happening with the relationship? A relationship is first. And so if you're shoving, and I remember that with the babies, did your friends do this where they would be like, come on, eat. And then they're like shoving the food in the face of the baby and the baby's like pulling away and they're like, get in there. And the anxiety that I was picking up on that they had and transferring. And so were your friends like that when they were baby feeding? So
I'm sure some of them definitely were. I mean, I was a sort of non-scheduling attachment parent, and I had friends who were hyper-schedulers, like from birth, and, had very fixed ideas about when you start solids and when you wean. What I will say is this, though. In my early years, like all good 30-somethings, I was extremely judgmental of anyone who did it a different way. I mean, that is just the rite of passage. In your 30s, you are convinced that you have found the one solution no one older than you ever found that was going to protect you from failure. So I definitely felt that way. I never used a single bottle with all 5 of my kids. We did cloth diapers. I was that person. So I remember thinking, these schedulers with their bottle feeding, all that, their kids were not going to turn out as well as mine. Well, here's the good news. I'm in my 50s. All of our kids are adults. Well,
and they're all fine.
I don't know if they are. They're all fine and a mess, just like everybody's kids,
totally.
like all humans. I mean, we get to adulthood with our own constellation of dysfunction, which comes from our family, outside influences, food choices, our unique neuroses. In other words, the goal isn't to find a safe haven away from the attack. I mean, we're wearing plastic, we're breathing air, we are listening on headphones to decibels 200 years ago no one listened to. We are doing an assault on our bodies all day, every day that we can't control. So there's some level of yielding, I think, that's valuable. And so we make intentional, conscious, good choices. And then we also live in acceptance and recognizing that we don't have the cure. There's no cure for being human, for being alive at this moment in time.
Yeah.
We are simply expanding the richness we can offer ourselves. That's how I try to see it now.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for that wisdom and perspective. While you were talking how old are your children now?
My oldest is 31, and then I have 5 kids. So 31, 29, 27, 24, and 22.
Okay. So I also feel like you are in that your kids, maybe the younger ones, are on the track that the latest research has come out about around the anxiety and depression and suicide in higher ed going up. So that would have been somewhere around your cohort of parenting.
Yes.
Any insight into that or what you think? What you saw?
It's interesting. Yeah, what a great question. Guy, you're a good interviewer. This is really fun stuff for me to talk about. So let me just qualify what I'm about to say with, I'm not a professional and I have not done the level of academic research, right? Yeah. So these will be sort of tentative speculations based on conversations in my peer group.
Yeah.
And we've all sort of decided that the 20s, we thought the teens were hard. The 20s are a brand new challenge to parent. And you kind of think, oh, good, at 18, I'm done. They can be on their own. And it's not like that at all. I think there is an absolute difference between the level of connectedness, the pressure of this global connectedness that the younger ones in my family and that age group are experiencing. They have no memory of life before the internet, literally zero. They only know connection. My son, Jacob, the middle child, who was a resident assistant at Ohio State, said that one of the pieces of their training was how to teach roommates to talk instead of texting when they had problems. And they were literally texting while sitting across from each other in the same dorm room. It's not like they were apart. They were in the same room, but they had lost sort of this capacity to confront discomfort in a face-to-face way. And I wonder if that's part of what contributes to this depression. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge fan of technology. My kids know that I say the internet is the watershed event of my whole life. I spent a number of years living abroad in Morocco in my 20s and early 30s and felt so disconnected that it led me to a depression. Yeah. So I want to point that out, like the disconnection. Yeah. I would have given anything for something like Instagram back then to know I was a meaningful part of the lives of the people that meant the most to me. But maybe the flip side is happening now where there's a kind of pressure to live a fulfilled, ideal life, to make a difference, to be able to showcase that difference you're making every step of the way and be validated for it. That maybe is the sort of backwash of this hyperconnectivity. I'm wondering.
Yeah. And I just love that I imagine you have these conversations with your kids about it and your friends about it, because I think, I just turned 40 in 2018. And so, but in DC, a lot of people don't have a baby until they're 37 or 38. So I do have friends who have younger ones.
Yes.
Still, but I have spent time at American University and with the undergrads, and it's just very present, and we just don't necessarily know what to do about it because we've never been in this situation before. But what I love about how you teach and why I really wanted to have this conversation, even if people are not thinking about homeschooling, is because your approach to learning and connection and relationship and creativity and writing, especially have so many friends who say their boys won't write.
Right.
You hear that a lot?
Oh, well, every single day of my life. And Brave Writer, my company, it has really been designed to help activate the writer inside all of us.
Yeah.
And often, it's interesting, I teach at the college level too. I'm an adjunct professor at Xavier University here in Cincinnati. So I've dealt with these incoming freshmen. And what I've noticed is that education in general, ever since Common Core and No Child Left Behind in particular, has become outcome performance-based education. Yeah. So kids at an earlier and earlier age are being conditioned to believe that the most important feature of their education is the finished product, not process, not risky thinking, not approaching a problem and giving themselves the opportunity to make mistakes or fail at it for a little while. So what we do in Brave Writer, and what I even urged in my classroom, was to begin to value the content of their thinking before we even think about mechanics. That the person that lives inside the body is the writer, not the hand. The hand is a secretary. It's a transcriptionist. And in fact, God forbid, but we could chop off both hands, gouge out both eyes of every child, and they could still be writers. Someone could transcribe for them. Stephen Hawking had a transcriptionist. He used voice-to-text software. We don't know if he can spell. We assume he could, but he never had to prove it. And yet he was the most brilliant mind of the 20th century. So we want to start to value the risky thinking, the imagination, the idea and thought generator, the insights, and we want to make space for those to not be accurate, to be not well thought through, for those to be poorly expressed. Because how do we grow? We have to start with a blob of clay that doesn't look like a mug yet. And we have to explore it for a while before we know precisely what we want to offer. That's true with math. Most math instruction is about getting right answers and following an instructed process and being judged for the final results. Where do we have the opportunity to give a child, let's say, a problem, and then say, how many ways could we approach this problem? How many possible solution strategies could we come up with? What happens if we get a wrong answer? What are various ways to establish whether or not it's true? These are absent in most traditional education, and we only give grades for final products. So students are conditioned by high school that everything, and by college, that everything is high stakes, that I've got to do well at the end, or the thing I really am working towards, the thing I really want, will not be available to me. That's how they're set up.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem to be working. I mean, I would just say it's just not working. And so what can we do as parents? Someone's, got two full-time working parents, and like, totally agree with you, Julie and Pleasance. That's so nice that you guys can homeschool. Ever hear that? So nice that you can think of doing that. But I can't. So what do I do? What would you say to her or him?
The very first thing you can do at home, no matter what educational model you're using, is be interested in what I call big, juicy conversations. The number one education happening in the family is talking. And we forget to talk. I tell parents a lot of times when we're really busy, we don't even look our kids in the eyes. They're shorter than us. So we look over their heads and we're directing traffic. We're like, okay, go get this, do this. Have you finished that? Are you ready for this? Hurry up. Exactly. We watch a television show or a movie together, and our idea of discussing it is, did you like it? Did you not like it? Okay, now let's get ready for bed. We have a joke in our family. I can't even say that the kids always loved this, but they look back on it now as a strategy they think is interesting. My kid's dad used to pause a movie in the middle, and he'd be like, okay, who are we rooting for? And then we'd keep going. Oh, well, who are we rooting against? How do we know we should be rooting against that guy? Why aren't we rooting for him? This is literary conversation, as opposed to who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist, what is the narrative arc. We're actually just capturing at a glance why we're invested, what we're invested in, and what are the clues going on in this movie that make us think that way. What would happen if we did root for the antagonist for the whole movie? Would it lead to a disappointing end then? How do we know what this is driving to? What do we think has to happen for this movie to be over? Well, this is all literary discussion happening around a Disney movie like Mulan. But it's a conversation. It's parents and children engaging over the content as opposed to just passively enjoying it as mere entertainment. We have some big memories in our family. I remember a very raging debate about Nacho Libre over dinner on the deck one summer afternoon. So not during the school year, not a high piece of educational art. And yet they still remember that. It was a debate with their dad that went on for about a half hour. So the first place to start is being curious about your child's mind life. staying open to what they say, not providing answers, being curious about how they're processing. My son Liam said to me, he's my 24-year-old, that the number one way to engage online video and gaming with children is to participate with them. Sit and watch it with them. Curate a playlist for them. Know what they're engaging in and be interested in it. Don't use it as a babysitter and a pacifying tool.
Yeah. And we definitely do that as parents who, I mean, I just want to, again, like, it's kind of a chicken or the egg, because a lot of the parents, at least, again, I'm going to speak from the DC lens, because that's where I live, is they are at jobs that are requiring them to work 24 hours a day because of the handhelds. So the bosses are already addicted to high beta brain, overdrive, you know, the frenzy of this is the most important thing. And that's very addictive here in DC with politics and government and all these super smart people. And then they're downloading to the you know, the employee, hey, do this after dinner. And the parent's like, great, go here. So I just want to say that it's not unidimensional. It's not simple answers. We have complexities within our system that I feel very empowered to have women and families say them out loud and be very clear and specific when we're taking when we're taking job choices and when we're talking with our bosses. Hey, is this going to be something where I'm expected to work all night? And how do we then sort of push up against that so that we can create those boundaries? I also think it's important to even have that conversation to someone who's asking, hey, you know, I'm not able to work from here to here. This is so that we can engage with our kids, because that's what's happened. That's what I see, is just these addictions to technology because it's demanded on them. And then they've got this technology that can babysit. And the kid seems happy, and we're losing so much of this connection.
That's it. And, you know, start with 5 minutes. Try not to do everything in my book or every suggestion. It maybe the big shift is you make a checklist and you say to yourself, okay, today I'm going to make eye contact with one of my 3 kids. I'm going to read a picture book to one of them, and I'm going to cuddle and be sympathetic with a child who shows distress. And I'm just going to look for those 3 opportunities to happen, and I'm going to do those. Don't say to yourself, well, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do any of it. I can't do all of it, so I can't do any of it. Start with choosing connection. And I talk to type A moms all the time, and they say, oh, but I have to get all through these tasks. And I say, you're in control of what you put on the checklist. So if you add to the checklist, cuddling a child, now it's on your radar. You're going to look for an opportunity for that to happen. And obviously, there will be times when your kids are watching TV or on YouTube where you aren't present. You know, I used to make dinner and listen to books on Audible, and I'd put my kids in front of PBS, and they would watch for an hour and a half, and that was like my sacred time of escape from them, knowing they were happy watching television. I made dinner and grew intellectually. I have no problem with that. I don't even see that as a problem at all. But I did feel comfortable with them watching PBS without me. That's the question you have to ask yourself. Are they, when they are pacifying themselves, experiencing something that doesn't need your supervision? Or is it something that really you should just be involved just to be sure? And so that's the parenting responsibility. If we take on these other tasks, I went to grad school, started a business, homeschooled all at the same time. So I'm no, stranger to creating a demanding life for the fun of it, apparently. Seems to be my MO. It just means being intentional about your children. Not if we choose to have them, we owe them that commitment. We can't excuse that away. So yes, there may be limits to what you can do. Maybe you don't want to homeschool. I don't advise everyone to homeschool. I had kids go to public high school. But we want to at least figure out then, what does connection and stimulation of learning look like under those constraints, and be deliberate about it, not just throw up our hands.
I think I just think it's essential right now that we sort of have that conversation and talk about it in real life. And what was your schedule like? So tell me about what your life looked like when you were growing the business and in grad school and homeschooling these kids.
Well, I was a stay-at-home mom, and my business was at home. So the big benefit I had is that I was in the house with my children most of the day. right? So that was still true. I only did grad school one night a week. It took a 2-year program, took 4 years. So I went slower. And I took classes that were one night a week, not 2 nights a week. So that would be after hours in the evening. I did most of my paper writing on the weekends. You know, I did reading whenever. I just squeezed it in before they got up, during the day when they were playing. You know, there was times for reading. My program was a vanity degree. I wasn't trying to become a nurse practitioner or something that required an internship. It was literally pure academics just for the fun of it. So it got a priority for my own personal development, but it did not take the place of earning money or raising children. So that's the first piece. I did usually work on my business in off hours. So when my kids were young, that meant getting up before they woke up or staying up after they went to bed. I would try to do homeschooling without any break in the morning. So we would wake up, have breakfast. I would go online for a few, half hour, and then we would start the day. And until after lunch, they had me fully. Usually, there are those moments.
About 80-20.
Yes, exactly. This or a discussion you need to have. But that was the routine for sure. We had a 1-day-a-week co-op, and we spent the whole day at the co-op with 100 other families. So I had this sort of system in place, and it worked very well for me. But we also should remember the internet was in its infancy between 1995 and about, I would say, 2005. I see a dramatic change once Facebook got on the scene and social media exploded. So today's parents, whether they work or they are at home, are inundated with a pressure to stay connected that was only growing while I was in those eras. I mean, literally when I started, there was only dial-up connection. So that really changes how you use the internet, and it wasn't on my phone yet. The phone probably started in, '08 for me is when the internet came to my phone. So I am interested always in how people are solving that now. And I try to stay current to that. And I'm interested in how kids are handling it. So I talk to my kids, actually, my adult kids, a lot about it.
Yeah. One of the things that's super interesting about your experience, and then I actually want to ask about all the sort of area, it feels like you have a few different businesses and a few different revenue streams and ways that you work. But before that, I want to talk about this desire to have your own life while you were tending to your 5 babies and dedicating your life to them in a lot of ways and their education. And still finding time for Julie with a capital J. So what was that? Why was that important? And what did that look like for you?
So I came through the door of homeschooling back when I was involved in a strongly Christian religious community. And so the ideal of being a stay-at-home mom who provided education to her children was held up as the pinnacle of a woman's fulfillment. And I read quite a few books on the topic and really bought in on a lot of levels. I mean, I really did love becoming a mother, and I loved staying at home. But interestingly, I was living abroad at the time when I was first reading all these books, and I was quite active in the work we were doing in North Africa. And as I watched this sort of pipeline coming at me, I'm going to have babies, I'm going to raise them at home, I wondered, is that the pinnacle of what my adulthood should be? So I remember there was this one book I was reading, and the author talked about how when we raise our children as home educators, we have the opportunity to create world changers. These kids who would go out and do great things, join the Peace Corps, be politically active, be professors, work in companies, experiment. And it was quite a vision, and they were building it up. You, as a parent, will have the chance to form these individuals by being their primary educator. And there was this crystal clear moment where it all backed up on me, and I went, wait, if the number one best career option for a married mother of children is to homeschool and raise them, then all those career options she just listed would only be open to boys and women who weren't mothers. And I suddenly thought, oh my gosh, so I'm not raising my daughters to be any any of those things if I have this other creation in mind. And that made the house of cards fall for me. And I suddenly realized I had been raised to grow up and be an adult. I had been raised to think I was going to make an amazing contribution to the world. That's how my parents raised me. Was I really waiting until I turned, 55 before I then even could consider it because I was so busy raising children? And I suddenly saw that it needed to happen simultaneously, that there was an identity piece of Julie that was going to contribute to humankind in some meaningful way that wasn't about my children. Although in my case, it's actually sprung out of raising children. So sometimes that experience leads you to the contribution you're going to make. But I saw quickly. And so that's when I started working on my writing career, just completely in addition to everything else I was doing. And, at the beginning, it was very fits and starts. I wasn't really getting jobs. I was sort of weaseling my way into that career. But it was so deeply satisfying. And it also contributed back to my homeschool life because my kids could see what an adult looked like. They saw what they were aspiring to becoming. I've heard from children who are adults now whose mothers homeschooled them, and they don't want to homeschool because it looks like a very limited life to them. And I did not want the chief role model of adulthood, these mothers, to look like a martyr's life. That seemed like a not good vision for our kids. So that's why it matters to me.
And that's where you started. Was Brave Writer first?
What started first is I originally tried to write children's picture books. So I would go every Monday night for 3 hours to the local library, and I did research. This is before the internet. So I did research.
Card catalog.
Totally. And I was writing books, and then I was learning how to write cover letters and submissions and how to work with publishers who were choosing not to publish me. And I was reading lots of information about the children's literature world. Well, simultaneous to that, I got hired to do some ghostwriting projects. I started being a freelancer who helped PhDs get their dissertations in shape for their final defense. I contributed to some collaborative projects, where I would write an article and it would appear in a book that was of these various ideas. I became a magazine editor, then I was a contributing editor. So I was growing as a freelance writer is what was happening. And eventually a friend of mine who homeschooled said, Julie, I know you're doing all this freelance writing. Do you have any tips on how to raise writers? And that's what led into Brave Writer, because my professional background of writing meant I approached writing differently than the educational establishment. And I didn't know that homeschoolers didn't know about that. So I brought my professional training and insight into the homeschooling space, combined with my homeschooling experience, and that's how Brave Writer was born.
And then tell me what's happened since then. Like, how did it sort of stay the same? I mean, I think that this career piece and pressing the gas and pulling back is very relevant and interesting to modern women. So talk a little bit about what that looked like with the kids and what's happening now with your businesses.
Oh, I love it. This is fun for me to talk about because there were some very deliberate choices throughout that process. So initially, I was simply just giving away free advice on a lot of homeschool discussion boards and discovering that it resonated with people.
Yeah.
One of those was a massive curriculum provider, and they noticed. So I was slowly thinking about building like a manual, some kind of program. And they then saw that I was doing that and asked me to write it for them. So that kind of funneled my energy into, okay, I can write this and they'll publish it. So I gathered a group of 40 families online. We called them the guinea pigs. And I would write a chapter. They would read it, use the processes, give me feedback on how it worked for their child, and then I would give them writing instruction as the reciprocal. Okay. We did this for about 6 months. They were invaluable to me. I built a very good product because I was engaged with a community who already knew me on some level from years of free advice, and I built a good product. The company that requested the product changed their mind. We didn't have a good agreement, so they just at the last minute said, no, we don't want to do it. It was that day that my husband at the time said, I was in tears. He's like, Julie, we will look back on this day as your liberation because now you get to do your own thing. Yep. So I said to myself, well, there are two things I can do. One, it turns out this emailing back and forth, helping mothers with writing was a thing. Like it really worked. Like they loved it. I could offer this as an online course. So in January of 2000, before any online classes existed in my space, I said I would offer an email class. I charged $25 per person. It lasted 8 weeks. It filled up and they loved it. So I immediately hired a second person, like within 2 months, which my husband at the time thought was really funny. But I said, there's no way I will be able to make any money if I'm the only one, and it needs to grow.
Yep.
So I hired a second person, and I also released my book. And we started selling, I know this will sound funny, we started selling 3 or 4 copies a month, and it made all the difference in our finances. They were $75 a piece, and selling 3 changed our lives. So that gives you a feel of the scale of our income level. You know, I think we were earning $38,000 a year for 7 people in 2000. So I ended up at a conference that year, an invitation to a homeschool conference because people were starting to hear about me. And I sold out my 40 or 50 copies that I brought with me. And now we knew, okay, Julie can speak, Julie can write, Julie can teach. So we're going to add this into our family's profile of income revenue. And my husband at the time made space. You know, he would look after the kids at different times of day. He was the one who laid out my book. He's the one who built my website. It was very much a team effort at the beginning. And here's the big decision I made, though, that slowed the growth of the business. I knew that if it got too big too fast, 2 things would happen. One, I couldn't hire quality people fast enough to live up to my expectations, and that I couldn't homeschool well. So what we decided was we would let it be organic growth. I did no advertising for 10 years. It was all word of mouth. And this is before social media. So we, you know, Facebook didn't come around until 2009 for us. So during that time, I was active on discussion boards. I was building an email list, but I'll let you know that by 10 years later, it was only 5,000 people. It wasn't a very big list. But 10 years later, the income we were earning was strong. So I made a lot of money on that 5,000 person email list that was first 500, then 1,000, then 1,500. I added a monthly subscription product in 2002 or 3. And I built curriculum that way. It set up a publishing schedule for me. People were expecting this product. So that today has over 200 products in the product line because I put myself on a schedule and I owed it to the subscribers. So that's a tip I give everyone. I just think it's a brilliant way to see if you even have something worth saying, to see if anyone likes what you do. And they give you feedback, so it gets better every single year. So we have that product, and I grew the classes as I trained people to join me. Today we have 35 teachers or something, but there were times when we only had 2, 3, 4, and we would sell out our classes to capacity, but that was enough. The other decision I made, which is very counter the strategy of a homeschool business, I chose not to travel to conventions. I never let my kids work for me, and I never went to conferences. So I believed in this online thing. I had digital products, so I had no warehousing, no binding of things. I didn't have to ship, and it allowed me maximum flexibility. Now, let's just put this in context. I had a husband who was earning our primary income. I was not the primary income. I was supplementary for about 8 or 10 years. There was a moment where my income eclipsed his. I remember the day, and we got into the car to go out for dinner that night, and I said this to John, oh my gosh, how have you been carrying the responsibility for our income for the last 12, 13 years? I just felt the full force of what that is. I can't quit this. This thing now has to continue. It's on me to pay the mortgage. Oh my gosh. And it was a literal visceral shift. And so I thanked him and I owned it. And the business really had to grow from there. But by then my kids were like high school age and there was more flexibility. So I'm just sharing kind of, that's the journey. That's the journey. And so now only in the last 5 years have I added travel to the schedule, and I've really taken on the speaking side of it. But, you know, my kids are out of college. They were in college, and I did not miss lacrosse, Shakespeare, soccer, ultimate frisbee. I was at all of it, and I have no regrets.
On the business side, I mean, it sounds like you don't have formal business training or business background, do you?
Zero. I've never been on a job interview.
Yeah. So the reason I asked that is because you were very smart with step one, which you said, which was delegating in month 2. So that's such a huge piece of it. And then growing, where did you learn all of the different models and ways? Like, were you reading books? Were you taking online classes? I think that I've run my business extremely intuitively also, and find classes online and things online and little books and things. But sometimes women will say to me, I want to do this, but I don't have an MBA. So can you talk a little about your own learning that you had to do in order to keep it going?
Yeah, for sure. So yes, at first you feel like you're in a big fun sandbox and you're like, someone gave me $20 to say something. This is amazing. And you don't realize even that there are business implications. So I remember at the end of my first year when I had hired this one person, she wrote to me at the end of January and said, do I get a 1099?
It was my tax stuff.
Yeah, and I didn't even know what that was. And I wrote it in ink by hand. You know, I still have my records from that first year, and they were all on notebook paper. I mean, I don't know how to use Excel. So literally
I think that's why Liz was like, you need to meet her, because you guys run your businesses very similarly. You just deal with stuff when it comes up.
When it comes up. I remember opening a business bank account, and the woman who opened it with me was so adorable. I think I was first of all, I had no expenses except, you know, we switched from modem, the phone modem, to cable. That was my first big expense, and it was like $20 a month, and we were like, can we afford that? You know, I mean, really. Yeah. So there was no expense, and I went in, I was going to deposit like $500 into this business account in my own name. Big recommendation. Don't ever start a business as a woman and put your husband's name in it. Please don't ever do that. Just protect yourself. Just do your own thing. They will survive it, and it's good for you. So I go in, I put in my own name, and she says, oh my gosh, I am so excited for you. You are going to make so much money. And I looked at her and I said, I am? And she said, oh, you sure are. You just wait and see what it's like a year from now. That little bit of faith in me was really magical. It felt really good. Yeah. So anyway, all that to say, I obviously didn't know what the heck I was doing for at least a year. But for some reason, I did know that I needed to duplicate myself. I don't know where that came from. My husband even laughed about it. He's like, boy, you think a lot of yourself. And I did say to him, because I knew the market, and I knew I was a good writer, and I knew I was actually a good speaker. And so I said to him, oh, you just wait. Someday I will have earned $500,000 in this business. And he kind of chuckled. So I think I knew that. I was online a lot, and I think I was watching other businesses and learning by watching. And then the biggest contributor early on was my brother. He was a door-to-door salesman in the 1970s and 80s, and he knows about direct marketing. Yeah. He got into the internet world, and he was the one who went to all these classes. And so we would just have conversations, and the monthly subscription service was his idea. I think he was thinking membership site. I didn't understand what he meant, so I just made up my own thing, and it worked out. But I got the point that to stabilize my business, I needed a predictable monthly revenue stream. Yeah. And so then I just took it and created what I thought would be fun for me to do. Yeah. I think I'm an insightful, creative idea person. I'm not a nuts and bolts person. So my first real hire was somebody to do everything I'm not good at. And she is with me to this day. I always say Cindy is my left and right arm. Yeah. She brought a lot of order to things that I didn't know how to manage. But she also had to learn a lot. I taught her how to copy and paste. That's how she became my person. So she didn't come with a lot of skills, but she's grown them. She had the right temperament, the right ideas. She knows Brave Writer well. So yeah, that's really what I did. And I have now read a lot of books. I really love the E-Myth. Yeah. I highly recommend that as a first read if you're just getting into this space. I would be wary of assuming that somebody who markets you okay, I'm going to make a very significant piece of business advice right here.
Yeah.
The businesses that are teaching you how to run a business, if they've never run a business except that teaches how to run a business, do not take their classes.
I cannot with this.
You agree?
Drives me up the wall. How on earth? I don't understand it.
It makes me angry, literally.
Me too.
They are making money off of giving you advice for something they've never done. And the way that they tell you they have business expertise is that they have talked to business owners about how to have business expertise. And they also give really bad advice. So I remember one in particular. For a while there, I took a lot of these online courses, not to grow my business, to see what they thought business was supposed to be about, because I'm pretty convinced of my own model.
Yeah.
And they would say really crazy things like, you should never use long form Facebook posts because no one has an attention span. I'm like, have you ever had to write long form posts? Do you have content?
Right.
Do you know how to write? I have made more money through long form Facebook posts. That's where I wrote 3 of my books, come through just essays on Facebook. They've been shared thousands of times. I grew from like 0 to 50,000 followers, long form Facebook posts with no images, because I know my customers. I know how to meet their needs.
Right.
I'm a good writer.
Right.
I can do content all day, every day of the year. That's the one thing I'm good at.
Yeah.
So when you go into these business spaces where they say, oh, you don't know how to do content, let us help you. If you don't have content, you don't have a business. So don't follow all of their stupid advice when you don't even know how to share what you care about. Learn how to do that.
Blanket like that. Anything that says don't ever is just, anytime I hear that, I'm like, goodbye, click, unsubscribe,
exactly.
Move away from me. Thank you.
Right.
And also for the same reason, because it's like, okay, well, that's awesome. And I've been in business for 11 years, like without that. So anyway, I just say that with the history of knowing yourself and any of those blankets. And I totally agree. And I also think that the reason we can be so clear on having that idea is because we've seen it and we experiment it, being able to push back. It's not like we had our head in the sand and trying to just figure it out on our own, that we're actively engaged in learning cool new things and ideas, but also really standing clear for what works for us. And that's what I really want women to always be tapping into. What works for you? What's working for your life? Nobody else has the answers necessarily out there. You can get some great tips and strategies. You can get inspired by someone. I love looking at other business models and pulling from different industries.
Yes. Yes.
But the minute it feels like comparison or less than, or that it's not fun, I'm like, unsubscribe. There's some juju here that I can't mess with.
That's it. And in fact, like I remember signing up for a very famous writer's how to write a book for publication course. Not because I didn't know how to write a book for publication. Yeah. I just wanted to understand what is he marketing? What is this like?
Totally.
So he markets it. He never says whether it's a live webinar or not. If they don't say live, it's not going to be live. Let me just tell you that right now. But he made it sound like it was going to be live without ever using the word, join me at 10 a.m. I will be there talking to you. So it was very ambiguous.
Hurry up, sign up now, because it's starting in 5 minutes.
Exactly. So I hop on, and he is, as far as I can tell, live. And he's got somebody else on. They're both wearing headsets, and they're talking to us. And then all of a sudden, there's this very awkward cut, and his voice doesn't sound the same. So not live. He's bringing in a webinar material from before. As he's going, all of a sudden the voice changes again, and he'll say something with like 2019 in it, and then it cuts back. So he's edited out the 2015 material. It was so poorly done. He is so well known, so famous, such an expert. And then he ends up with, thanks for joining me today, with the same headset as the beginning. It was a terrible editing job. The other thing I noticed is I always ask a question in a webinar, because that's how you find out if it's live. If they don't say your question, they are using old questions from a previous webinar. Why does that matter?
Yeah.
To me, it matters because they don't care about you. They want you there buying their stuff with the illusion of it being live. Well, here's what's crazy. If you get into this world far enough, you're actually going to get that advice. So is that who you are? Is that your brand? Do you want to be that person?
Totally.
I would rather grow differently and honor the values that I keep telling people about, being real, being connected, building relationship, than that. I won't ever be a hack-a-shack. I'm not interested. Maybe my bottom line growth is slower, but I'll tell you, my bottom line is awesome. I literally have zero debt. We have hundreds of, well, I'll keep the numbers to myself, but we have tons of cash.
Whatever you're comfortable with. Yeah.
We have tons of cash.
Yeah.
And so I am in a position where I can make really solid business decisions every day of the week because I'm under no pressure. I don't have investors. I don't owe anybody anything.
Right.
And I didn't start building a retirement till I turned 50. So you just need to know that. And I'm going to be fine because my business is healthy.
Yeah.
My bookkeeper and accountant tell me, and they work with companies that make gazillions of dollars. And they're like, Julie, you're the healthiest business we've ever worked with.
Yeah.
I'm proud of that. That feels good to me.
That's amazing. So, and especially with the percent, I don't know what the latest numbers are for women-owned businesses, but they're pathetic in terms of how much women make and how long they last. And what's really disheartening to me is that there's so many women in business and starting businesses, but the amount that they make is so little, and that goes on and on and on and on forever, which is a whole different conversation about money blocks and all of that. But it's
totally. And I think it's very important. I joined an organization last year, the National Association of Women's Business Owners, 20 years in, and I thought, oh, maybe I should be in one of those. So I went to their conference, and actually almost everything they shared was stuff I'm already doing. I would need to be at another level. But if you're new, that's a great idea. I wish I had known about that stuff. There are all kinds of angel investors and grants that you can get at the beginning because you're a woman.
Yeah.
I just didn't know to connect. I was, just busy in my little house by myself. Like I said, I've never been in the business world, so I've had to learn a lot. I have 2 consultants now. I'm working through challenges like, can employees have a side hustle? That's a big question. What does it look like to have employees versus independent contractors, offering a staff retreat, right? This is all stuff that I've had to learn on the go, but let me just tell you, you can, and it's actually enjoyable. Sometimes it's torture. I go through agonies over some decisions, but it is stimulating, and you can learn it on the job. You don't have to know it in advance. Some type A people don't realize that. So I just want you to know that.
Totally. I think it's so important to share that. And so what I'm hearing is that you didn't get to a certain level and then stop learning and growing.
Oh my gosh, no. No, in fact, the bigger you get, the more you have to learn and grow.
Oh.
So it's okay.
It's like bigger kids, bigger problems, bigger
It's
businesses.
exactly that. No, it's 100% that. Yeah. My boyfriend is like a solo lawyer, and every day he says to me, I love my boss, I love my employee, because, I'm in this
well,
weird
I think
state.
it is something to be, I think that because of social media and because of the more culture and the bigger the better, that we can get really caught up in that. And and owning a yoga studio in a big city was very big and external. And I've really, since I let it go and closed, have really shifted my family time, I call it freedom time. So one of my core desired feelings is freedom. And what that looks like in real life is that I can take a bath at noon every day if I want.
There you go.
There's no speaking gig. There's no amount of money that can ever equal the bath at noon. That's just me being yes, I am me. And the reason I say that is because people keep wanting, especially with online, grow, do another webinar, more. And I'm like, I'm good. This is awesome. I'm having a great time with my business. I have enough time with my kids. I'm the healthiest person I know because I sleep really well. When is enough? And I think that a lot of times we don't talk about that,
And you can redefine that at different stages. So when I was in that early period with young kids and homeschooling, I didn't want to be grouchy. I didn't want to travel and find that I had missed one of their best experiences. I didn't want them to think that I was more interested in the people I was teaching how to homeschool than the very children I was homeschooling. I actually wanted to do that job. One of the most interesting moments in the most recent year or 2 years, I was at a conference where the woman whose program I used was speaking. So the first program I ever used, the designer was the keynote. And her whole talk was about how she was a fraud. She was coming clean. That during the homeschooling years, she was traveling so much, hawking her product. She would come home tired, angry, in a fight with her husband. The kids were at war. And when their kids got to adulthood, the kids did an intervention with her and said, you will not see your grandchildren until you go and work on your anger. And so here she is confessing this to a room full of people, many of whom have used her program, and she was living a complete lie for 20 years. See, I don't know why, but I knew that's what was going on. I could feel it, the energy at those conventions, and I just didn't want that life. So I'm very satisfied that I didn't grow. There's every now and then the little feeling like, oh, I should have written my book younger. It would have been more time to write more books. And then I just remind myself everything's in exchange, and the decisions I made then I actually still value. So
that alignment piece.
Right.
I know our time is up. I want to finish with this reading from, you don't have your book in front of you, do you?
I do not. Did you want me to get it and read to you?
No. I'll read it.
That in.
I should have asked you to bring it so that you could have read it to us.
Oh, no, I have it handy. Oh, yeah, I can go grab it. Hold on.
Okay, get it.
Unless, can you edit? I'm assuming that you can. Yeah. Okay, let me go grab it.
But it's also nice to have a pause. We're okay with silence here. It's good for good for the soul to take a deep breath.
Absolutely.
And relax. We don't need to rush. Boredom is very good.
Agreed.
That's what I tell people. It's okay to be bored for a minute. Okay, so what I loved, unless you have a certain place, do you have a certain paragraph that you love to read from?
Oh, no, you pick. I'm always much more interested in what you think is interesting.
I love the bottom of 273 going to the end of the book, going to the last words on 274. That starts with, I forgot to teach U.S. government. This I love.
I will read it then.
Okay.
All right. I forgot to teach U.S. government. No one became proficient on the piano. We never figured out a once and for all housekeeping system. Life rolled forward, and some of what I took for granted shattered. John and I are no longer married. We continue the project of loving and serving our adult kids as best we can. We found a way through our version of pain and heartache. We made tough choices, and we adapted. We keep forgiving ourselves and each other for being oh so very human. Homeschooling, hell, parenting, is a journey of courage into the unknown with an audacious belief that you will be enough for your children, the ultimate brave learning adventure. It can't be any other way. Whatever you offer your kids, your best and your worst, they take it and turn it into fuel for their own blazing fires of blinding beauty. They astonish us every day, even as they terrify us too. You're doing it right if you stay connected and every now and then pause in awe. Look, those are my amazing human beings. Keep going. I'm rooting for you.
I have all the chills. Julie, you're an amazing human. I love you. I love talking to you. More Julie in my life.
Pure delight. You are awesome. I love what you're doing. And just thank you for such a wonderful invitation. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. So awesome.
Thank you so much. I'll put all the links to all your stuff in the notes so everyone can find it. And thanks, Liz. You're with us. Thanks for connecting us, dear Liz.
I love it. Love Liz. Love that Johanna knows you too. It's wonderful. So great.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Thank you for everything.
Thanks, Pleasance.
Bye.
Bye.